looks like y'all are a couple years late on that lyric.
Yeah, interestingly, looking back at some of the old comments from those reviews, people were predicting that the 2022 series was going to be a sky-based season, and instead, we got another food season that wasn't really that much about food at the end of the day, and as a result, felt rather cobbled together.
Why, if I didn't know any better, I'd almost assume Delicious Party was a panic move after Tropical Rouge didn't sell so well, so they compromised their initial plans and just did our food season in the hopes that the merch revenue would be better. Ain't karma a bitch?
Okay, I'll admit, that's a bit of a crazy little conspiracy theory that my friends and I have discussed, and we have no solid evidence to back it. Nevertheless, thematically, it does feel like this new series really should have come right after a more water-based season like Tropical Rouge.
But at least now we are getting it, so what exactly are my hopes and expectations for Hirogaru Sky Precure? Well, I've got a few.
So, based on the response we got from the initial short we did, it seems like the consensus is that this new show is either going to be mainly bird or angel themed, to which I say... ¿Por qué no los dos? I mean, personally, I like to see more birds than angels, as one, I think the latter is a little played out for magical girls, and two, I really like Jetman. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they can't eventually evolve into angels as like a super form, which might actually be pretty damn epic.
Oh wait, isn't that guy a villain? Actually, hold that thought.
Yeah, for the villains, while being evil and devilish is the obvious path they can go down, and probably what they will go with, I'd also like to see a Precure team actually fight someone who on first glance might look righteous, but deep down is the real final boss of the series. It could lead to a great moral quandary where they could question if they were really fighting for righteous reasons, and have to make some sort of difficult choice in order to preserve the justice they believe in. They almost did with the Mermaid Queen in Tropical Rouge and her legit tyrannical beliefs, and it would make for an interesting twist villain rather than, well... He's fat! Lastly, I do hope the quill pen seen in the logo does get put to good use, as we mentioned in the initial short. Hopefully it'll be used to create objects like the Shoto phone and make for creative battles if they're not willing to do any more CQC as much as they used to. I liked it when they did in Ojamajo Doremi, so I can like it here if it's done right.
As for the actual number of cures, well, ultimately, I don't think I really care whether or not we get the original dual format, as has been rumored with some.
Though this logo does seem to suggest that we'll go with the usual 3 primary color setup of magenta, cyan, and yellow.
But still, quantity won't matter if we don't get a quality head writer.
To me, the biggest slip-up of Delicious Party was Sawako Hirabayashi, who had only written a few episodes of Healing Good previously, and in general was still a relatively newbie writer who was just not ready for the position of head. Granted, same can be said for a lot of the secondary writers of that show, but still, a good head chef can turn even the worst kitchen from hell into something decent.
Thus, for the remainder of this video, we'll just list off the writers who we hope will take up the reins for this show.
We'll start off with some of the most likely choices, aka the in-house scripters, and then work our way out to some more fantasy booking territory. But yeah, let's address the 3 most common names of this franchise: Jin Tanaka, Yoshimi Narita, and Isao Murayama.
Now, if I were to predict, and also give my personal pick amongst these 3, I would go with Tanaka.
He's the only one of the 3 who's actually written for this franchise in the past year, and I personally just find him to be a fun writer who understands the genre he's writing for. Granted, he can be quite cynical at times, but if he can also pull off some of that good character writing like he did for Gold Princess and Late Bad Camp, then I'm all for bringing him back as a head writer.
Following him, I would say another good pick might be Isao Murayama, who I hope would be able to do a little more with the whole pen thing this time around.
While I've had my issues with his writing in the past, I'm also not going to deny that his Akira episodes for Tropical Rouge were some of my favorites. Not to mention, he also understands the importance of visual storytelling, which after this last season, we need someone who understands how even a slight twitch or facial expression can say 1,000 words. Last up, we have Yoshimi Narita.
Her last head writing credit was for Happiness Charge Precure, and while I've gone on record saying that I don't think it was that bad, I also do have to acknowledge that it's been almost a decade since that show, so she might be a little out of practice.
Sure, she has kept herself busy as a secondary writer for most seasons after, but I think she's also kinda slipped into being more of a comedy one-off writer than a full-on head writer at this point. I would personally bring her in for a few good laughs here and there as a secondary writer, but as the head writer, nah, she's probably my last choice of these three. Next up, we have the one-off head writers of this franchise who I think deserve another go-around. Atsushi Maekawa, Shoji Yonemura, and Masahiro Yokotani. And if our Tropical Rouge conspiracy theory was correct, then maybe this guy was always meant to take on the 2022 series. Sure, Tropical Rouge had a lot of issues with its writing, though I blame that more on Toei not giving Yokotani and its main secondary writers the ability to write what they wanted. So maybe Hero Sky was meant to be a minor sequel to TRP in the same way that Dome Brothers is kind of sort of a sequel to Zenkaiser.
Again, these are conspiracy theories, so take it with the heaviest pinch of salt possible, though maybe the reason behind that dog poo ending was because he was salty over not being able to do his thing.
Anyway, whatever the circumstances, Yokotani had easily some of the best written episodes of his series, with him managing to balance comedic and more serial moments when necessary, and again, about the importance of visual storytelling with a lot of effective symbolism, which is a trait of someone who's been writing for as long as he has. From there, I would say the next likely writer could be Shoji Yonemura, who in spite of his flimsy track record for tokusatsu, has shown to be a very good writer for this franchise. And while Smile was a good while ago, he did keep himself busy writing into Doki Doki, and then later wrote Superstars, so yeah, he is still relatively fresh, all things considered. Even more so if you consider 2020's Pretty Den-O as a spiritual crossover between Kamen Rider and Precure.
Yeah, I might also want him to do another Precure just so that he doesn't do any more Rider shows if at all possible.
Still, I will always be a fan of Smile, and its financial success is something that the Toei higher-ups should consider, especially in these times. For pretty much the same reasons, I do also want to mention Atsushi Maekawa, though this might be one of the least likely since he hasn't written for this franchise since Fresh, and has kind of gone AWOL from writing in general, with the last thing I've seen of his being for Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains from 2017 to 2019. Still, if anyone could restart a golden age for this franchise, then he's not a bad choice at all. Next up are technically in-house, if you consider Toei Animation and its Tokusatsu to be the same company, Roof.
I mean, come on, we just listed two writers who got their big breaks writing for the guys in spandex, so why not bring in a couple more like Yasuko Kobayashi and Naruhisa Arakawa?
In the case of the former, I've actually heard arguments for why she might be a good fit for Precure, having also served as a head writer for Sailor Moon, Pretty Guardian. Yeah, okay, the effects here are kind of cheesy as all hell, but I've heard the writing was really good. Not to mention, I do really like a lot of her work, my personal favorite being Shinkenger, a season with some of the best written female Sentai. Seriously, Kotoha would not feel at all out of place in Precure. Not to mention, she's also written for a fair handful of anime, though that also might be one of her greatest weaknesses, as she also tends to put a lot on her plate, and I think she's currently working on 2 JoJo properties right now.
Though the line between JoJo and Precure has gotten pretty thin.
And it also might help that she wants to write for something aside from Sentai, especially after Goldbusters and ToQger were kind of overshadowed by the parody series Akiba Ranger of all things, which on that note... This is another one I personally really want to see, and honestly think it could make for a perfect fit. Naruhisa Arakawa, for me, is a great example of a writer who writes for all ages. Sure, he can write goofy characters who can get laughs out of the kiddies, whilst also not being too juvenile, and also never talking down to them. In fact, he tends to invite them to put a little more thought into what it means to be a superhero, all with the end goal of teaching everyone of any age just to be a better person. And in many ways, you could say he formed the foundation of many modern toy superheroes, having restarted the Kamen Rider franchise with Kuga. In that sense, it would be like things are just coming full circle, as the renewed interest in the Riders also helped helped in the launch of the Precure.
Not to mention, and even more so than Kobayashi, he has written for a lot of anime, including magical girls like, I don't know who this is.
Okay, but seriously, even if it was a fan servicey show all about fetishes, he still somehow made it almost frustratingly entertaining, and if anything, you do get the sense that there is passion in everything he works on, and that he does take his job seriously, so I do think he's one of the most ideal writers for this franchise. Last up, we're going to bring up a bit more of a miscellaneous choice, but you know, the more I thought about it, the more I really want this guy to write for the show. Now, to be fair, he has already written for this franchise as the aforementioned secondary writer to Yokotani and Tropical Rouge, and yet he's always been one of the last people I'd ever expect to write for a magical girl anime on Sunday mornings.
For you see, before there was the Uru Butcher, there was the Yoshidon. No, not you.
For those unfamiliar, Hiroyuki Yoshino is a very prolific sci-fi anime writer, which of course includes a lot of Gundam from Seed to Destiny, and he also head-wrote Macross Frontier. All well and good, and the last show did put a heavier emphasis on its female characters, who were idols. Yeah, hopefully that won't be a major theme for the season.
More importantly though, he is also known for his twists, and while I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I think just mentioning My Hime will dig up some old trauma for some.
In the case of that show, the impact of the twist did hit a lot harder because it was still mostly a straightforward magical girl anime with some sci-fi elements. But then at a certain point... And yet, unlike say certain Marvel movies that had a lot of dramatic scenes undercut by ill-advised humor, moments like these didn't feel unearned or out of nowhere. They still felt like they were building towards them, especially in hindsight. Thus, I always felt like some of the darker twists involving the Grand Ocean were at least a collab between him and Yokotani, if not outright his brainchild.
And yeah, if you couldn't tell, the fact that we never got any real follow-up to that really interesting plotline remains one of my biggest issues with that series, and I will not stop complaining about it unless this new series suffice me.
However, for this particular series, arguably one of his most important writing credits is the criminally underrated Sora no Oto, which yes, we've been using clips from, and hey, hi Kanata. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend checking it out. It's just a fun and joyous little slice of life that takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting after war has reduced both sides back to the Dark Ages.
But hey, look, cute anime girls, right?
Nah, but seriously, it is a very engaging, character-driven show, with the main character Kanata being a peppy little everyday girl who, yeah, is written very much like a Precure lead. In fact, she is voiced by a Cure, as well as two of the other leads, while the other two are evil generals.
Now you see, it was all meant to be.
But yeah, it's still a fun series that does get super serial at times, especially at the end, when they're on the brink of another war and they have to make some very difficult choices to prevent it. Ultimately, they choose an aggressive and yet also the most peaceful method of resolving things. Sound familiar? It was produced by A1 Pictures, so you know it's gonna look nice, especially their depictions of the sky, which, yeah, is a common theme in Yoshino's writing. I think for him, the sky represents infinite possibilities that we can always look up to, as well as a symbol of unity, as no matter where we're from or what we believe in, we all do look up at the same sky. It's a common visual he likes to end all of his series on, and if he does it with Hero Sky, then, well, no matter what sort of insane twist may await us, at least we'll have a truly glorious ending to look forward to.
And I think that's all we have to say for now, but please feel free to leave your own thoughts. What are some of the motifs and themes you're expecting for this new series? What might be your ideal cast and crew? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And until next time though, farewell for now my friends, and oh yeah, I forgot to mention Toshiki Inoue, since he did write for Jetman, which, you know, birds and all that. So maybe he would actually be a good fit too. Yeah, you know what? Never mind.